Hey guys, how are you doing? I wanted to talk about boundaries today and the confusion between having healthy boundaries, but also where it can become too compulsive as well. I think for a lot of people, it can also go into the topic of like being disrespected and not being able to stand up for yourself, those kind of things. And it's a very relevant topic based off of just even cultural conversations that we've had over the last, I would say, probably decade in society around having boundaries and how to have a voice and not be a doormat for people, stuff like that. But obviously, when you have OCD, then these things can become very confusing. And for you to be able to challenge that notion of whether you need boundaries or not also becomes like they're very blurry lines. And then you start to then question, okay, what are some healthy boundaries? What are compulsive boundaries? Where am I going too much? Stuff like that. And I think the easiest way for me to cover this topic is to perhaps just like chart my own journey with having boundaries, and you can take whatever lessons you can from it. And I'll obviously overlap that with the core fears that I had over the years with this, and with relationship OCD and fear of guilt and shame as well that I had. So and you can make whatever you can from that. But before I go on, as always, please subscribe to the channel. Let us know what you think. If you have any questions from this video, let me know. If you like this video, let me know, so that I also like can know if I'm talking about relevant topics or not as well. But anyway, so I think, I mean, for the first 18, 19 years of my life, I would easily say that I was, for the most part, I would say I leaned, as a personality, I leaned more towards being a people pleaser. Part of that came from school as well, because I did well in school. From a young age, my teachers and everyone expected a lot from me. And they had a lot of praises to say about me. So therefore, obviously when you're young, and that's kind of like your first foray into public life, in that way and you're getting good remarks, then you think, oh, maybe this is how I need to be and this is who I am, kind of thing. And part of it was also from family as well. Obviously there would be like good things that even family would say and friends would say, and I thought, okay, maybe I am this now, this good person who always needs to be a good person. So there was this, I mean, constant quest for always impressing people, making people happy, making sure that whatever I did was up to the mark. And I did not want to say no to people. I always wanted to help them out. I always wanted to meet people's expectations. That was a big thing for me. And I think, like, looking back now, easily up till my teenage years, I was the fear of not fulfilling people's expectations was a big thing for me, because it felt like there was this, there was a certain standard that I had set by my own behaviors, and now I had to keep meeting that standard for myself. So there were so many angles to it. Obviously, there was fear of rejection, because it was like, if I fail, if I don't do what people want me to do or what they expect of me, that image that they have built in their mind of who I am as a person, whether it's as a great student or whether it's as a great friend, or whether it's someone who is intelligent, that image would be broken, and then they will realize that, oh, this person was not who we thought he was. So that was kind of like that thing I was constantly trying to maintain, that image that people had of me and that impression, and the entire, like, I'm going to fulfill the potential that people think I have, and I that entire chase for that. So obviously, like, even saying no to people was like a huge problem for me, because I felt extremely guilty. I thought I was letting people down. I thought I was not being a good friend, or maybe I was being inconsiderate. There was a lot of relationship OCD I had with my friendships as well. Massively, in fact, I had, because if I thought that, let's say a friend asked me for help and I said no, the reason that would scare me is because I thought that, well, they're going to clearly see me as unreliable. Then they're going to go to someone else. And then next time, they will never come to me for help, and they will always go to the other person for help. And I don't want that, because then I will become less important as a friend. and I will not be like their first choice. I will not be their preference. Like that kind of obsessive, kind of almost like a, I would say it was almost like a platonic limerence in that way, where I always wanted to be the most important friend, or the most reliable friend, or the most sensible friend, the friend who gave the best advice, the friend who was also the best at cheering people up, blah blah blah. So it was kind of like really obsessive, obviously, in that way. So up till that point it was that, and I would, but over the years it got to a point really badly where I, even though I was always saying yes to people, I was helping people out, I was always there for people when they needed me, always keeping my own desires and needs and preferences like literally boxed up into the side, and never like gave myself any preference at all. um, I also started to then become very resentful and really bitter, and kind of not, I'm not bitter that much, to be honest, but yeah, there was resentment, and there was constant frustration and agitation and irritation, not only towards myself, because I was like, what am I doing? I'm constantly putting myself in a position where, I mean, I'm really tired, I don't have the time, and I'm still offering help for someone else. Like, I don't know why am I doing this? But then also towards other people, the resentment would come out on other people as well, because I thought, I mean, if someone would ask me for help and I said yes, then I would feel pissed off at them, because I would think that you've asked me for help and now you've put me in a position where I have to say yes, and now I have to sacrifice my own time and be there for you. So it would go in and out, and it, I mean, the rejection element and the dislike element would be internal but also external as well. And so I realized, I mean, I think by the time I was like 20, I realized how unsustainable this format of living was. And at the time I didn't even have any awareness that I had OCD, or there was even anything called relationship OCD. That, I mean, that was nowhere even near my awareness. But overall, I could see that it's something that was making me unhappy quite a lot, because in fact I would say some of my people pleasing tendencies led to quite a lot of arguments and conflicts, because my desperate need to keep everything together, and to like, eventually it got to a point where I just started to go in overdrive, and it started to aggravate people, and it caused very clear kind of like conflicts with my friendships, at least. So those were some good wake up calls for me as well, that no matter how much I try to please people and do things that they like, I will still end up messing up, and I will still end up doing something that will give me that rejection. And I think in some ways now, I mean, I can say that I was lucky to have that kind of natural exposure from life itself, that I faced quite a lot of rejection and bad feedback and whatnot at that time, because it really helped me reflect on a lot of things and just try and change the way I was. And so I realized I was obviously being a people pleaser and saying yes to everyone, and being afraid of people's opinions about me and stuff like that. But then when I started to change that, and this is where I think by when I was 20, 21, something like that, I started therapy at the time as well, because I mean, there was stuff I felt like there was a lot of stuff in my life that I needed to clearly discuss as well, not just this but then other stuff as well. Anyway, through that process, I wanted to change my behaviors, and I wanted to be like, okay, I want to be like a different person. I don't want to be the same version that has lived up till this point, because I mean, there have been some good things I want to take forward, but clearly there are some unsustainable, unhealthy behaviors I want to change too. Through that process, what happened was that, if I like, from being like a chronic people pleaser, I went completely the other way, where it was all about boundaries, and me then creating boundaries almost all the time in that way, and very strict boundaries. They weren't even flexible. And so from saying yes all the time, I went completely to the other end of saying no all the time. It was almost like in my mind, I had to balance out the scales, where it was more people pleasing, so I had to balance that out by constantly saying no now. It was this, I mean, almost that just right feeling as well of like, I need to get this just right and balance out, this thing where it feels heavier on one side. But obviously, it didn't feel, I mean, I went like that for about 3, 4 years, maybe at least. I think I was on the side of then having very strict, rigid boundaries with people, saying no a lot of the time. And then that started causing problems as well, because then I was, in fact, then I was not there for people when they needed me. I was not present at important events. I was mainly quite absent, and it became a very selfish format of a friendship as well, that I would hang out with people only when I wanted to, or I would speak to them only when I felt like it, kind of thing. And that started to aggravate people in another way, because they were like, what, you never, take initiative with us, you never want to spend time. Whenever we try to make a plan, you're always saying no, all that kind of stuff. And my friendships, some of my closest friendships at the time became, for a period of time, became quite distant because of that. So in my mind, even though it felt like creating those boundaries was like a very like important and almost like essential thing to do, I needed this wake up call as well from my, especially from my friendships, also from family as well, but especially from my friendships. I needed this wake up call too, to be like, okay, maybe I've gone too much on the other extreme of things now. And also it was a good exposure on that front as well, because even though I was creating boundaries, I was still, and in some ways I kind of like at times didn't really care about what people were then saying about me or thinking about me, but I had gone a little bit too far on that front as well. So then I think it was a good wake up call to realize that, okay, even being this nonchalant about, uh, upsetting people or breaking people's hearts is also maybe not that great as well. And also not a great plan if I want to keep these friendships, because at heart, even though I was, whatever boundaries I was making, I valued those friendships and I absolutely loved my friends still. But it was almost like I just wanted to operate on my terms all the time. So that realization was quite good. So I think like from maybe roughly from, I mean, I'm just like hypothetically, not hypothetically, I'm just like having rough timelines. I don't remember any exact date or turning point or month or anything, but I think it was around when I was maybe 24, 25, where I really started to recalibrate and be like, okay. And by that time, I had also realized I had OCD. I had started to learn about irrational beliefs. I had started to learn about core fears. So I think me having those big realizations with my friendships also coincided with my awareness about OCD, not just with my contamination OCD, but also realizing that my irrational beliefs also played out in my daily life, in my friendships, and realizing I had something called relationship OCD with my friendships. So I think both those coincided in a very good way, because they gave me the motivation and the momentum to start making the changes in my relationship dynamics in my life. And that's where I had to come to a middle ground on that as well. So from becoming like a complete people pleaser to becoming a complete no person to somewhere in the middle, where now I mean, if you even ask me now that, oh, Moen, what are your boundaries? I don't know. I don't have like a list in my mind of like, oh, these are deal breakers in my mind, or these are like friendship or relationship red flags that I don't have that list. And I'm glad I don't have that list, because I think when people are going into any kind of friendship or relationship, even before anything has started, they already have these like strict rules where you're not even giving yourself or the other person a chance. And I think it becomes a bit of a lose-lose situation, because you're already disqualifying someone who actually might be good to have in your life in whatever capacity. And I have to speak about this with people who are also on dating journeys themselves as well, where they're swiping left on people even if they see slightly something remotely that they disagree with on their profile. And look, I mean, relationship dynamics in life are very complicated. Sometimes people come in and they have very complicated dynamics, even with their family, where I have to help them try and come to like a bit more of a balanced middle ground with how they're viewing it, because sometimes they're viewing it very rigidly as well. And it's not about that, oh, someone who has been extremely, and this is where when we talk about flexibility and we talk about, you know, being not so rigid, sometimes people think that, oh, but like this person has wronged me so much, how can I just like completely be okay with them? No, it's not. You're not going from you're going from a 0 to 100. You're thinking in very black and white terms, that either you need to be completely like, you know, aggressive towards people and completely shut them out, or you need to be like, I don't know, like best friends and braid each other's hair or something like that. But no, that's not needed over here. It doesn't need to be that in either of those extremes. Like you can also just have a middle ground kind of relationship where you're not aggressive, but you're also not like fully like lovey-dovey with people either. There's a certain kind of like stability to that kind of thing. And I think this is especially true for family members, because family members are people that you oftentimes cannot really cut out from your life, or like, and it's also not great to, or maybe even possible to completely cut them out of your life. So is there a way that you can come to like a more middle ground situation? And this is where I should have this as a tagline written somewhere in a box on the side in every video I do, because over here I'll say the same thing I say every time, especially in relationships. Like, context matters. Context matters so much, because obviously people come from complicated relationship dynamics with family, friends, partners, but at the same time, like, there's a lot of added on catastrophic layers of thinking and irrational beliefs that we are adding onto it ourselves. And I think people get too much into the semantics of like who did what, but they're not looking at, okay, what is the perspective and belief I have over what situation has taken place. And that is something that's so important when you're thinking about stuff like boundaries and stuff like wanting to create healthy boundaries. And with OCD, obviously, the lines will become very blurry, because you becoming or trying to become blurry, trying to become flexible about your boundaries is going to feel like you are doing some kind of injustice to yourself. You are being unfair to yourself. You are not treating yourself how you deserve to be treated. All those notions are going to be there, and that's where the rigidity with like, no, but I need to implement these boundaries will come into play. So looking at those beliefs is going to be extremely key, because like when you are going to start giving up some of those compulsive behaviors that you are currently doing, it's going to feel extremely hard. It's going to feel extremely hard in feeling like you are, again, that you're doing something inherently wrong. That's how it's going to feel. So, but with any kind of exposure in life, we know that that's also something that we have to do. In trying to create a more balanced version of being there for people, but also sometimes just doing what I wanted to do as well, there were times where I had to show up and, you know, be there for someone, or whether it was showing up to even something as simple as, let's say, like a dinner party, or as simple as showing up to a hangout where I didn't feel like hanging out. Initially it felt wrong, because all the notions that I had been following were, hey, listen to your body, listen to what your brain is telling you, listen to what your needs are, try and listen to what your body is saying you need to do, listen to your gut instinct. So that is what I was doing for the longest time. And initially when I started to go against that and break that, it literally felt like at times that I was doing something against my own will. And that I also realized was coming from a belief that I must not do things that are against my will. That was a very strong belief as well. And I think a lot of people these days, especially, hold that belief very strongly, that I must not do anything against my will. To the point where obviously it's so ingrained, and anything that slightly wavers from what they think their needs are, it gives them that kind of like panicky anger, frustration, like catastrophic emotional reaction to things. So, what are some of the common beliefs then that come with creating boundaries? Things must go the way that I want them to go. I must not do things that are against my will. Things that are against my will must not be imposed on me. I must always listen to my body. I must always do things that feel right. I must not do something that makes me feel uncomfortable. Um, I must always be honest. That's another big one, because in saying no to things, it's also like OCD will also make it feel like, no, you're doing this in the name of honesty and being transparent. And if you're not being honest and transparent, then you're being fake, you're being a fraud, you're leading people on, all that kind of stuff, right? On that note, I will do a separate video on the fear of being a fraud, and I will also do a separate video on relationship OCD with friendships, because I think that doesn't often get covered enough. So those are some of the, I would say, beliefs to perhaps look at and explore when you're thinking about boundaries and when you're thinking about wanting to implement boundaries as well, because things are not that simple. I think the internet makes it very easy. If you go on any random, like, fluffy, wishy-washy kind of relationship advice page, or a page that puts, like, these random quotations that come from, like, the void. um they will all be like, hey, if someone is not good for your energy, then you need to walk away from them, or if someone is not good for this, then you need to cut them out. And the internet makes it out to be so extremely black and white about these things, which is really not healthy, to be honest. Because where is that getting everyone? We're coming to a place in society at times where people have cut out so many friendships and people, and especially with OCD sufferers who also take things to like a level 100 anyway, that you've cut out so many people from your life to the point where you are essentially lonely in life, and you don't have a lot of people to rely on. You don't have a lot of people you can call on. There are more people that you fought with than people that you have not fought with, in that sense. And that's not a great place to be in, really. And then you really have to ask yourself, that is are the deal breakers and the red flags and the boundaries that you have set out for yourself, and the conditional acceptance of other people and yourself that you have listed out, is that something that's actually genuinely making you happy in life? Is that something that's making you thrive in your relationships? Is that something that's helping you progress in your career? Is it something that's helping you have meaningful friendships and spending time with people around you? Is it something that's inspiring you in life? And most of the time, the answer to those questions is no, it's really not. It's actually making people quite unhappy. But they're still doing it because we live at a time now where it's like, hey, you always need to be, like, just to yourself, and you always need to stand up for yourself. No, you don't always have to. And you don't always need to as well. Sometimes, like, that's not even required. And I think again, like I said, there's a middle ground over here. Obviously, there are situations where, if I have to say something, I say something, but I don't make it a point where I have to, like, bang my chest and be like, no, I need to be heard and I need to be listened to, and you need to respect my needs and desires and boundaries and whatever it is. Like, sometimes, I mean, even in friendships, like, someone would cross a boundary. Okay, they cross the boundary. Like, I mean, I'm my boundaries, or whatever they are, it's not like a set universal rule that has to now be followed. It's a very arbitrary thing that I've just come up with. And these are things that change for people over time as well. And if someone crosses them, okay, fine. I mean, big deal. It's, and we're not even talking about any kind of extreme measures over here. People will take, like, small little things and say that, oh, this was the most disrespectful thing to me, and this is like a boundary for me. If people do say this thing to me or do this with me, then I can't ever be friends with them, and that's not this and this for me. Like, come on, like, we're taking ourselves way too seriously in life sometimes. And of course, sometimes, like, with OCD, it will feel like, no, but, like, why I'm like, it's also the validation kind of thing as well, that I don't want my feelings to be invalidated. Like, no one is saying that you need to completely throw out your feelings 100% and they don't matter ever, ever, ever. But, like, really think about, to what extreme are you really practicing these things? Are you practicing a flexible and more contextual and adaptable version of what you think your boundaries or your your list of like requirements per se are? Is that flexible, or is that something so rigid that it's leading you to have frequent arguments, frequent fights, sometimes even screaming matches, to be honest, isolation, not having that many friends, distancing people from yourself, not having too many conversations or hangouts with family and friends and loved ones? If that's what's happening, is it really worth it then? It's something to really think about. So I'll end with this. When it comes to the question of, okay, so how do I actually implement uh, boundaries, and what is like a healthy version of boundaries, and where does it get compulsive? I think the best way to proceed forward with this is not to figure out whether it's OCD or whether it's like a real boundary you need to put. I think it's thinking more along the lines of like, what are my beliefs around this? What are my beliefs around the situation? If someone has, let's say, if you feel like a friend or someone has crossed a boundary or they've violated a boundary, what are your beliefs around that? That in itself will actually, when you look at things in a bit more of a rational way, because right now you're thinking most likely of something at a 100 level emotional way, right? So when you think of something in a more rational way, is there, maybe there's more clarity that you can come to, and a bit more of a balanced way of approaching with it, which where it's not like, oh, I never want to see your face again, but it's also not like a thing of, oh, I'm not, you're my best friend ever, and that's that. So there's a bit more of a middle ground that you can come to by looking at what are your beliefs around that, and then you can even see yourself of where you're being a bit too extreme sometimes in your thinking, and you automatically then start to back down a bit, which is very much needed in many situations. Our visceral emotional response in situations where we are trying to implement very rigid boundaries is also coming oftentimes from a place of not having compassion and understanding of the other person and where they're coming from, which oftentimes is quite needed in situations like this as well. So again, this is, I mean, almost like a half an hour video, but like, and you might walk away from this video thinking, yeah, but I still didn't get an answer. But yeah, I mean, I think the like over here, the answer per se is really not what you're looking for. I think it's more so like, how can you approach a situation where that can be confusing and that can feel a little bit like wonky that way, and looking at things from different perspectives, which is always very key. But yeah, guys, I hope you took something away from this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and let me know what you think.